For me, getting beyond means getting beyond the given, the status quo, the general perception of what should be, beyond what's expected of you based on who others think you are. Beyond is a pretty big idea, and it can also be a feeling. So getting beyond where I'm stuck, or at least I think I'm stuck. I wanted to make you feel as if your time today was well spent, so I had to unstick myself and figure out what to say. First and foremost, I believe that it's your creativity that gets you beyond. There are artists who have never stopped evolving. Some of my favorites are Picasso, Miles Davis, Tibor Kalman, who founded the design firm M & Company, Aretha. If you've never heard her sing Puccini, Google it. It goes way beyond R-E-S-P-E-C-T. These are people I admire because they never let themselves mark time and place. They never settled for what was expected of them. They didn't churn out variations of what they had already done. Each work throughout their careers built on the previous work until they found themselves in a brand new incarnation. But their evolution didn't come without harsh criticism. It's like the fans that go to a concert of a great band, the fans who want to hear the old songs, the ones that are familiar, the ones that they can sing along with, not the new stuff. But despite the criticism, the artists I admire never stopped evolving. I don't know what drove them, but I do know what drives me. I'll be honest with you. It's fear. My fear of standing still, my fear of not growing, of being stuck. I'd like to share with you some of the things I've learned to help me get unstuck, to get beyond the fear, to get beyond myself. Your imagination can be your worst enemy. Oh God, what would happen if I did this, or what would happen if it doesn't work? What would people say? Or I don't think I can do this because blah, 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 blah. Or your imagination can be your strongest ally. Wouldn't it be cool if I did this? Or how about thinking about doing it this way? What I've learned to do is ask myself, what's in operation here? Am I being intuitive? Or am I being paranoid? After all, what's the worst thing that can happen if I push and go forward? Criticism? Making things that never see the light of day? I'm in there. But I can honestly say now, nothing. Nothing really bad ever happened. Oh sure, I've made mistakes, quite a few, but I've always tried to be honest with myself and move on as quickly as I can. And rather than hope that, miraculously, things will turn around by themselves. I tend to be pragmatic. And what's helped push me beyond the boundaries of push beyond the boundaries that either I or other people have set are a few phrases that I've totally taken out of context. I use them to question myself, sometimes assure myself, and to sort out and move beyond my real or perceived limitations. The first phrase is pro forma language that appeared within one of my first work-for-hire contracts. It read, I represent and warrant that my services are unique. Regardless of what that meant contractually, I took this idea out of context and applied it to myself. The idea that what I brought to the table was unique allowed me to realize that I wasn't competing with others. If somebody wanted to hire them, then clearly they're not interested in me. I bring the sum total of my own life's experience to my work, as do each of you. It's our individual uniqueness that can't be duplicated by anyone. You don't need to compare yourself or your work against any other person. Your services, your ideas are unique. Now, you could chalk that up to my own magical thinking, but it's really helped me to push forward, especially to get beyond rejection. Another phrase I embraced when I was being considered to work at the MacArthur Foundation, I looked up its mission statement, and at the time it read that they were committed to improving the human condition. How cool is that? Working to improve the human condition. That phrase grounded me and became my reason for doing the work that I do. It framed my commitment to my work. I don't make things, I work to help others make things. That can be anything from supporting a social issue documentary, including holding the filmmaker's hand, sometimes for years, because it may take that long to get the film made and distributed. Or encouraging an artist to make art for art's sake, because their work needs to be in the world. It could be the work that I'm doing now with the Center for Digital Democracy, with their advocacy work to protect all of our privacy rights, or creating GeoLoom, the interactive arts and culture map of Baltimore that we're building at the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance. All of these efforts, in my mind, are designed to, in some way, improve the human condition. Another phrase, avoid bullshit. It's the first phrase I came across that resonated for me when I was a teenager, and it's been with me ever since. It's a fundamental philosophy that can save you a lot of personal and professional agony. Avoid bullshit. I came of age during the Vietnam War and the Black Power movement. A popular slogan at the time was, question authority. For me, the phrase gave me license to do whatever I thought was right and to ignore the status quo, especially in relationship to human rights. At that time, the status quo was actually killing people at home and abroad. There were certain expectations I had to get beyond in my life. Coming up during that volatile time enabled me to be a proud beneficiary of affirmative action. This was an era when the attitude was, oh gee, do we have to hire a black one? Expectations were low, and I had to prove that I was not only good enough to do the job, but I could go far beyond expectations. After working so hard for years, I realized that, in fact, I was pretty daggone good, even better than a whole lot of people. But I discovered that being really good at what I do can also work against you. People can get pissed off when you're right, especially if you were considered other to begin with, and they didn't think that you belonged at the table in the first place. So over the course of my career, I learned a lot and eventually knew a lot. But getting older helps you figure out what you don't really know, what you don't really do well, and as important, what you don't like to do. And when you're honest with yourself about those things, you can successfully push yourself forward and help others to move beyond the boundaries. As I said, it's been fear that's driven me. There are those of us who suffocate under the status quo, who actually feel the threat of death if we're standing still. There are those of us who are compelled by our imaginations to break through, to take risks, to see what's on the other side. Throughout my career, I've traveled a zigzaggy path, as Olivia pointed out, but it's only become clear in retrospect. I've worked for corporations and for nonprofits. I tended to stay inside an organization for about 3 years and then worked outside for a few years. I've never been fired, but I could feel that when my time at a particular institution had come to a close. Once I've satisfied my own self-defined proof of concept, I needed to move on. I had to move on. It's impossible for me to stay still. And in retrospect, I've come to understand that I'm really good at startups or organizations in the throes of major transitions. And once that's done, someone else can come in and do the maintenance. What I've gained from this pattern of work is tremendous flexibility. I've learned many ways of doing things and getting things done. I've developed an extensive cadre of dear friends and colleagues who are essential to helping me push beyond conventional limitations. But there are still challenges that repeat themselves time and time again. One of the most frustrating is getting beyond invisibility. Being an African-American woman in America who insisted on having a career in media and then philanthropy at a time when there were very few of us, often made and can still make me feel invisible. I'd make a suggestion or a comment, and it would be as if I hadn't spoken. Did the frustration make me angry? Absolutely. But I used that anger to become better than, to demonstrate that my services, my vision, was in fact unique. And eventually, I was able to consistently demonstrate to employers or clients that if they wanted a good product, if they wanted to get it done on time and on budget, you had to pay me and you had to give me the credit where credit was due. Which brings me to another phrase I adopted to keep me going, particularly working as a consultant. It's actually taken from the lyrics of a song made famous by Ruth Brown, and it goes, "If I can't sell it, I'm gonna sit down on it. Lord knows I ain't gonna give it away." When I wrote that down for this talk, it reminded me of a time in my career when the repeated challenge was making the invisible visible. Teasing invisibility can be an intriguing exercise, and it's very much rooted in creativity. I kept being hired to create promotional material for things that didn't exist. Video scripts for the then 7 phone companies after the breakup of AT&T, a sizzle reel magazine and website for a non-existent cable channel, and one of my personal faves, a promotional video for the Library of Congress to raise money for what became their first digital archive. And this was at a time when the internet was primarily used by scientists, and one of the only public user groups was the well. For me, the key to getting any of that done was a process that I'm sure all of you go through. I would ask myself, what would or should it look and sound like if it really was a thing? In the case of the phone company contract, how could I go beyond these scientists who would, how can I go beyond what these scientists would write in a manual? How do I make something engaging that they can glean information from, but it's not a dense talking head instructional video? So in that case, for the research division of the Bell system, I wrote a musical. And it must have been okay because they kept hiring me to write more, and I was able to go beyond the status quo and take them with me. At one point, I did a couple of documentaries for the Smithsonian. I had to get the final sign-off from a group of scientists and scholars. At the end of the screening, there was dead silence. The first scientist to speak up said, "Well, this certainly isn't a typical nature film." No, I replied. If that's what you had in mind, you shouldn't have hired me. The film had its life in home video, which was the original intent. It went on to become one of the first releases of Discovery Channel's new interactive division. And I received a personal thank you letter from E.O. Wilson, telling me he watched it and how thrilled he was to be a part of it, especially since Darth Vader did the narration. Actually, it was James Earl Jones as himself. But that's what E.O. Wilson said. So sometimes when you go beyond, you find yourself at the edge of the universe. But as Douglas Adams said, there's a great restaurant out there. So where am I now? What am I trying to get beyond? My cynicism, for one. Back in 2009, Barbara Ehrenreich wrote a New York Times op-ed piece in which she put forward the idea that those who are always looking for a silver lining and maintain that things aren't as bad as they seem are the ones who ultimately delay positive change. That idea coincides with an old joke that was incorporated in a book title by the late great novelist James Kirkwood. A short version of the joke is that a little boy opened a door to a room and the room was filled with horse manure. Rather than be upset, the little boy became excited and shouted, "Look at all this horse manure. There must be a pony in there somewhere." I'm not that optimistic. I don't believe that the manure that's currently encircling the globe means that we're going to all go out and have pony rides. We're living through a time that's pretty grim. Democracies, while none are perfect, are being challenged in unprecedented ways. Human rights, personal dignity, even science are being denied. The web has enabled extraordinary learning and communication across borders, but it's also prompted the dissemination of falsehoods, hatred, and murder. Creativity can generate bad behavior as it can generate behavior that serves the common good. It's up to us to use our creativity to drive technology in a pro-social direction, to use whatever skills we have to unmask treachery, to hold everyone accountable, to evoke truth and beauty whenever and wherever we can. As my friend Patty Zimmerman has said, we're in states of emergency, and it's up to us to do whatever is in our power to work towards improving the human condition. Recently, I was asked, what gives you hope? I had to think for a minute, and I responded that given our current circumstances, quite frankly, I didn't have any hope. But I was hoping to get to the place where I, in fact, was hopeful. Right now, I'm hoping to have hope. But like the phrases I mentioned that keep me grounded, I must admit that the creation of art fuels my drive towards hopefulness. Music forms that stretch boundaries like Lemonade or Chad Lawson's Chopin Variations. Books like James McBride's The Good Lord Bird. Amazing sculpture, brilliant paintings, wonderful inspirational things that keep moving us forward. And they need not be new things, but art that always colors outside of the lines of what's expected. That's what pushes me in the direction of hope. Which brings me to what I'll leave you with, a Shel Silverstein poem that you can find in A Light in the Attic. It's called Put Something In. Draw a crazy picture, write a nutty poem, sing a mumble-gumble song, whistle through a comb. Do a loony-goony dance across the kitchen floor. Put something silly in the world that ain't been there before. Thank you.